you have to, got it. Other than to say you have to secure your data. And a lot of people use that to say, privacy is totally different from cybersecurity. And anybody who confuses the two is an idiot. And I say no, because right inside the GDPR, it says you must take all the effort, you must do what you need to do to make sure that this information is also secure. So whilst the subset is unique to GDPR, personally identifiable information, GDPR does not care about your IP, right? So you could have a company secret, it could be a formula, right? Coke, the Coke formula is well protected by nested cybersecurity, but it's nothing to do with GDPR. And this is a slide we used on, I think it was session 2. The difference between privacy is a byproduct of authorized access. So I have a list of email addresses and I decide to market to them, right? So that's a privacy concern. Do you have the permission to do that? Is that a lawful use of that data? The concerns is often related to the unauthorized, right, system behavior. So hacker, right? Of course, in practice, human error is always authorized. So then we have this slide, which again is a sort of a repeat, but it was just in case anybody who hadn't been at the last one, that when we think about a risk, we have all these components. So there should be an asset, right, that we're talking about. We don't generally talk about things in general. What would happen if that asset was breached in some way? Something we didn't discuss last time, but happens under 1 or 2 risk management frameworks, are the idea that you should be thinking about your threat communities. And the threat communities for you will be different from another organization. So a government department will have in its threat communities other government departments in other countries. So what we call state level actors. And if you're a government agency, you believe that there is nothing you can do to prevent a state level actor getting access to information that is online. So governments these days, they separate their data and they put it into offline, so air-gapped separate networks, because a state level actor, right, can breach any system you could imagine if it's online, right? Yeah. They have all the tools. So threat communities therefore include things like idiot staff, poorly trained staff, disgruntled staff. So everything you might have in there. The threat obviously is something. Again, if we don't identify it, then we can be a bit nebulous. So we try and think of, say, something like, say, human error. We discussed those before. The vulnerabilities, this is the key, right? So if you have an invulnerable system, if for some reason your organization was, well, let us say the Ministry of Defense, right? So it considers itself to be, rock solid, but it still has vulnerabilities because it has to hire staff. So when it thinks about where are our weaknesses, right, then all organizations have them, because otherwise no one can access the data. So for as long as someone can access the data, by definition, we're now starting to think about vulnerabilities. And then controls we discussed, some people call them measures. So these are the things, I see, I've got some copy pasta sitting there. Don't follow this instruction, Echo Park, right? That's from the template.
I was like, what is that? Yeah.
What is this? Yeah, so you should know it by now. This is the cyber speak. But so controls and measures, obviously, the things you put in place. And today's discussion, right, is mostly about those. Because despite everything I've just said, right, that this is the right thing to do, to have a specific asset, specific threat, specific vulnerability, and those things together make up a single risk that you can then say is high or low. Because obviously you could have 2 systems. One system is your CRM, contains your customer data. Another one contains your staff data, right? Just their emails, say, right? What are the results of either one being breached? In one case, it's a disaster. In the other case, it's bad, but not that bad. No one really cares if you release who works for you. They're all posting that on LinkedIn anyway, right? People do care that you release your customers, right? So they can't be the same risk, because the impact is different, even though they still have the same general vulnerabilities of passwords or being online or system is out of date or they have so many things in common, but the impact's different. So providing that one thing is different, we can see that the risk is different.
Right.
So park that, because the government, right, through its departments, such as the Department for Health, does in fact believe that we should take some basic steps. And so whilst we can get into some detail later, we want to talk some specifics. The purpose of today is just, here is Douglas. The purpose of today, waiting for Douglas to arrive. Douglas, hi. We made a start. It was just intro stuff. We're going to hit the meat right now. Here's the real thing. You haven't arrived too late. You're just in time. Perfect timing. So the government, despite saying that essentially risk management is about specific, detailed, unique risks, the government does in fact have an expectation. So given that you're all in health, at some point you're going to want to work with a health department or the NHS or a hospital. And one of the entry qualifications to those kind of contracts is that you have passed Cyber Essentials. And so I thought I'd just wander through Cyber Essentials today, right, to show you that A, it's easy, you can do it, but also you have to do it. Right? I can't see any way around it for any of you, right? And in fact, generally, to be someone who contracts with the government these days is, first of all, do you have your Cyber Essentials certificate? And it is exactly what I said you shouldn't do, which is to apply some general controls. But in actual fact, the government's perspective is that most of the things that will happen to you, especially as a small business, are related to things that the small mistakes that you make about your logins, about your passwords, about your laptops, about your rights and permissions, about always using the same account, and it's the same account that has admin access, and so you then make a mistake. That is where the government sees that the basic things that will happen to you are not about hackers. They're not about specific threats or people who want access. That's fine. We'll deal with those. But actually, most of the time, what will go wrong is that you haven't done the basics. So the government scheme is about the basics. It has what they call the 5 basic controls. And as I say, it's not a specific risk. It's prophylactic. Okay. What are the 5 controls? Right. Well, we're going to go through in a minute. The self-assessment. So again, as you know, I don't like to redo stuff that you can get for yourself online. So as per the privacy assessment last week, which you can all access yourself, again, I'm going to show you something that you can then go off and do later yourselves, which is a little self-assessment that they create. But these are the 5 controls, right? So first of all, they insist that if you have systems or servers or even laptops, so those laptops are connected to the internet, you should have a firewall, right? And you should know what they are, and you should know that you have one and that you've set it up, right? The firewall is your basic protection against people scanning your networks. So if you have, for example, software as a service, it already has firewalls, right? If you develop your own server and you stick it in a co-located center, you better be managing the firewalls. But even laptops can have software firewalls, and you will have a firewall on your home Wi-Fi. So firewalls, yep. 2, secure configuration. If you take a computer and it's out of the box, probably it's set to just auto run a CD or auto run a USB stick or auto run something you download off the internet. That's because it's set up for ease, for use. But if you are deploying 10 laptops for workers, even if they're working at home, you might want to set those laptops up in a way that one has an account. You can only log into the laptop with an account. The account has a password, right? And that it's set in a secure way. So you've deleted the media player, you've deleted the 3 games, you've deleted XYZ, you just install the software you can use. And that's what they mean by secure configuration. User access control, it should not be possible to log into any of your servers without going through a user ID. You should not be sharing that user ID amongst people. They should all have strong passwords. Ideally, you have multi-factor authentication, 2-factor authentication. And in fact, again, the government says that 99% of all of your user access login hacking is fixed with MFA, and yet people don't put it on. Again, I'll leave that for later. Fourthly, that you know about malware protection, antivirus, and that you have that on all your systems, and it's up to date, and you've paid for a license, and that license is updating. Now, these days, of course, with Microsoft Defender, perfectly good antivirus system, comes out of the box with Microsoft, a part of Microsoft 365's ecosystem, and you can indeed install it on Macs now, but either way, something you have to have, and that applies to mobile phones, right? And then finally, patch management, updates management, that all of your systems are continuously updated. right? Now, this can be tricky for developers because they like to work on a stable server platform, and they would usually switch off automatic updates and then decide when to do it. So for servers, you just need a formal, every month we do patches, or patch Tuesday, right? For home laptops, they should just be set to auto update. Again, really annoying when it tries to update during the middle of a presentation, the classic Microsoft hoopla. But again, you could just set up the settings to do that in the evening, right? And make sure, because essentially what we're saying is that all of the big software and operating system suppliers are aware of vulnerabilities. They're aware of their weaknesses. They find a little thing that people are using, they patch it. For as long as you don't patch it, the vulnerability remains for you. So those are the five controls. And so now I wanted to just go through who's making these. Well, it's the National Cybersecurity Center, right, which is a government agency, right? And they have delegated to a group called IASME, which I mentioned before, Information Assurance for SMEs. And the scheme is called Cyber Essentials, right? And so these two groups together, right, the NCSC and IASME, have formed up to create a basic self-inspection routine for you guys to then go, right, if I do these things, I can then ask IASME, and then you pay a fee, it's a few £100, and they can either self-assess you online, or there's a kind of a gold version where they can actually do more of a sort of an audit. And again, got the money, may as well do that. And it basically ensures that you can then say to a third party, yes, we've got Cyber Essentials, which, as I say, is the bare minimum, right? But it's good to know that that's true for you. And when I do this with organizations, it is interesting how many things pop up. So for today, we will go through this thing that you guys can do, right? And as I say, on the Cyber Essentials, on the IASME site, on their site, they have a spreadsheet version you can download and use it as your kind of checklist. I often work with clients and they push that into their Monday boards or their Jira boards, so that they have a kind of a project to complete all of these things. And of course, you won't pass it all in one go. It will create some work for you. If you are a charity, I think there are possibility to have some of this funded. So I think there are some of it can be done, but we'll say no for now. And we're not a school, otherwise it also be funded. And we'll say that we are in health. And we will say we are a micro-organization, all right? And we'll say that all 10 staff are home workers. We've not done it before. And we're wherever we want to be. We're in Bar, let's say, okay? So the first thing, and for you guys, this is easy, but for an organization that was even up to a few, dozens or 100 people, you can decide just to do the UK part of the organization. But it's important that they will expect you to do, yes, the whole organization. So you can't say, for example, right, well, just do the servers when you also have 10 people on laptops, right? So you only get the full certificate if you're actually wrapping the whole organization into this thing. Yes, all devices, right? I think if you pay the fee and you're less than a certain size, like 20 million, and you agree that the full scope, I think it comes with a cyber insurance package. I don't know if it's taken it up, but it's there. I think it's like not huge, but would pay for example, an investment.
You pay for insurance to get coverage. Is that what you mean by insurance package?
Yeah, so essentially, if you should pay the fee anyway to be inspected, and then if providing you've agreed that this is the entire scope, that there's no pieces outside the scope, and that you're less than a certain amount of turnover, they have a few tens of thousands, I think, insurance package, which would pay for an investigation. So say, for example, I had a breach, you could call on them, and then that would pay for an audit company to come and do an investigation for you. So. Right, meat and drink. You'll remember from our various previous sessions that the asset register is something I've already asked you to do. So your answer to this question should clearly be yes. If you don't have this, then you have absolutely no idea what you're covering. So you can't even say, oh, it's all devices. How many devices have you got? How many? And here we're talking about everything, including tablets and mobile phones. And this is the bit that often kind of catches people out. They go, well, actually, I don't know who's got a mobile phone or how many mobile phones they've got, right? And the interesting thing is that they ask you which versions of operating systems have you got, right? And so I've had customers who've put that in, and they say these 3 are not supported. These are ancient versions of iOS or ancient versions of Android, and they're no longer supported by the manufacturer, and so you fail, right? And that's all you have to do is take them off. In actual fact, when I say this is a prophylactic, there's ways around it, and most people just basically take those devices off and resubmit it, and it gets passed. But because you guys are better than that, right? You're going to say, well, okay, why are we actually allowing staff to use 5-year-old mobile phones that are out of support, that haven't had a security patch for 3 years, that are a genuine vulnerability for being owned by, some botnet or some malware, or whatever. So the asset register is going to contain all your hardware, right? I don't think any of you using thin clients. That's if you had a server and you had your kind of Citrix or your Wise terminals. Do you own or rent servers, right? What do we mean by that? Well, a lot of people rent servers on the cloud and do all the work themselves. It's not impossible that you have a server. As I say, it's getting, especially for SMEs, almost unheard of. But I do have some clients who have some very specific needs and philosophies and say, no, we want to own our servers, that we buy them, and then we have a co-location center. So you could say yes to this, most likely, if you have, for example, SaaS, you've got a couple of virtual servers in there. And that's it. Now, we went through the asset register before, but I think that's, again, something that you should have already thought about. The lesson from this particular page is everything is in there, and mobile phones is the thing that's hardest to do. Government departments, they just don't let you use your BYOD. It's just not ever going to be secure enough or up to date enough. So if you work for a government department, you're going to get your phone. If you need a phone, you're going to get a phone from them. So it's going to issue you with an iPhone that they control, blah, blah, blah. Smaller organizations, that's going to be unlikely, and you all have your own phones and no one wants a second phone and blah, blah, blah. And this is where you're going to have to think about a mobile device management solution, MDM. There's Microsoft Intune, there's Adigy, there's Jamf. There are a few solutions out there that allow you to, first of all, install the MDM client and then manage the device remotely. A lot of employees don't want that. They say, I don't really like this. That's something you're going to have to negotiate with a small team and say, well, should we just get phones? What's my recommendation? Just get phones, right? Have company phones, hand them out, fully managed by your MDM solution. That's the most secure thing. But most people are going to have to find a compromise, especially in the early days. So we're going next. Right. Do you have a list of all the software used by your organization? Probably you do, right? You've got Microsoft Office, you've got Google G Suite. But this, of course, includes all the software on your servers as well, right? So again, it's all part of your asset management. Yes, I have a list of all software and firmware used on the devices, right? So if you're running, you've got your kind of back-end customer service, you've got your back-end, load balancers, all of that goes in this list. So every software asset that you have, right? Do you have virtualization? If again, I bet you do, right? Certainly your developers do. Now, here's an interesting thing here. They talk about, so on this one, on the next one, we'll talk about it now. The responsibility matrix for SaaS varies depending on whether you're entirely managing the server. So that is to say that you're my weird client who insists on owning his servers and he puts them into a co-location. He owns everything about the server. He's entirely responsible from the firewall all the way to the bare metal, right? But most people are taking a server off Amazon. If you're taking a virtual server, Amazon's going to handle some things, but you're still going to be handling the stuff that's on the server, especially user access. If you take platform as a service, one up. And finally, if you take software as a service, the supplier will be doing almost everything except the creation of the user accounts. So the responsibility model varies depending on the nature of your of which of these it is, platform or service. So do you have virtual servers? Yes, you do. Is your virtual server's operating system, the hypervisor, receiving its security updates? As I say, if you say no to any of these, you just fail the test. So I'm showing you these not to get you totally up to speed on how it is that you will discover all this. You're going to have to do this with your developers, pull them into a room, give them the spreadsheet that you download and say, I need you to answer these questions. And they'll say, I don't know. You say, well, I'll figure it out. Okay. It's not something a business leader has to just automatically know or do, but these are the kind of questions that you probe with your developers. So you say, yes, of course, my hypervisor software is supported. It's not a 10-year-old version of Citrix, right? It's up to date. It's receiving its updates. It's patched. Is it automatically enabled? This is a little tricky one for IT guys, because if the automatic update for software X breaks software Y, then you have an outage. So clearly, automatic is an interesting word, but for Cyber Essentials, they're expecting the answer to be yes. And you certainly have to demonstrate why not. And you'd say yes for phones, yes for laptops, no for the server. It's patched on a Tuesday, right? So Microsoft produces its patch Tuesday. Other software often has a kind of a cycle like that. And you just accept that there is a week between a patch, perhaps going live, in which a vulnerability will arise. Now, you could say that's not good enough. And therefore you say to your developers, we need a shorter cycle, or we need to have more awareness of when an exploit is too severe for us to just wait a week before we patch it. But I'm going to say yes, because that's what it's expected. Do you use software that's no longer in support? That piece of software you've been using for 10 years, you bought a license 10 years ago and you put it on your laptop, right? It hasn't been supported, the company went bust, doesn't matter, you bought the software, right? You bought the software, you own it, it's on your laptop or your server. And you've been running it for years, but it hasn't been patched, hasn't been supported by the supplier, and that's the kind of thing that will fail you, right? Because it could contain all kinds of vulnerabilities. So very important for the Cyber Essentials scheme that all the software you use is up to date. No longer you can use, Windows XP, right? Is no longer good. Yes, it gives you this problem. No, good. So we mentioned the 5 controls. So we've just done the secure patching. We've agreed that everything is going to be automatically patched with up-to-date software. One of the other controls is firewalls. And this is going to depend a lot on your physical setup. For a lot of people with just home workers, just using Google G Suite or Microsoft 365, there's no network. So a lot of the questions related to Cyber Essentials are still thinking about the idea that you have an IT department, they have a server room, or some servers are in some cupboard of the office, etc., etc. So a lot of the firewall questions are assuming that. But these days, of course, we're all at home, right? When we're at home on a hub, in actual fact, this is slightly out of date. The very latest version of their download is that essentially home workers, the internet starts at the laptop. Okay, so you no longer have to think about your home Wi-Fi hub as being in scope. So that is considered public internet, right? You're just moving across the internet there. So that this page is slightly out of date, and it's better now. So essentially, you have a network at work, and then you have a firewall you have to manage. But if you don't have a network, if you don't have a server room, then actually we're talking about laptops. So do you have a firewall between your business network and the internet? We're going to say yes, right? Because you're going to be using Microsoft's built-in firewall, or you're going to be using Apple's built-in firewall, right? Or you're going to deploy a third-party solution that you've decided to purchase that contains a firewall. Norton, like McAfee. Like there's a market full of products out there. But to be honest with you, Apple Mac comes with a working firewall, and so does Windows, right? They come with these products out of the box, and they can be centrally managed from your MDM. So we mentioned the MDM earlier. Say you're using Windows devices, you could go for a Windows license that includes Intune, and that allows you to set policies on your laptops. For example, firewall must be on, right? The secure disk must be on, etc. So you can set these kind of policies. Again, this is back in the day. This question is related to the fact that you've received a firewall from Cisco and it comes with a default password. Of course it does. Otherwise, you can't access it. So you can't set it up. So of course it comes with a default password, probably password, right? Admin, right? A lot of these things have these kind of backdoors. This is insisting that you've changed it. Again, if you only have SaaS, it's not going to be an issue. If you do have a firewall at work because you decide to install one, or if you've got one at home because you've decided to install one, right? Do you have a process? And this process actually applies across the whole of IT for, do you have a system in place for what happens if you thought something had gone wrong? So an incident management process to manage security incidents, right? 100% you to have that. Now, is it a shared mailbox? Yes, it could be. That's the simplest thing you could do, would be to create a shared mailbox for all the relevant IT or managers who want to receive notification from a member of staff who has what? Lost a laptop, feels that they were compromised in some way. What if it's a shared environment at home? What if it's a shared Wi-Fi? What if there's flatmates or lodgers and you saw them looking at the bottom of your router? Why would they do that, right? I mean, it's pretty fanciful, but that's what they mean here. So how you think someone's got your password is one thing, but really what they're saying is, do you have a process? And you're going to say, yes, I have a process, right? What I do when I think that something's been compromised. And I say specifically, they're talking about firewalls here. Actually, you should have this for all of your systems. If you feel that someone watched you enter a password, do staff have a place to go? They say, shit, I don't know how to do this. Well, that's a problem. They do nothing for a day. They should just know to email cybersecurity or security incidents, or go to your help desk portal for your team and put in security incident. And that should flag it for whoever's responsible. And they know to then go and block that user, change the password, arrange to securely fix that problem, blah, 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 move on. Yep. Do you have any services enabled that are accessible externally? For 5 home users with 5 Macs, the answer is no, right? But what is your business? Well, your business is to have a server, right? Well, where is that server? So we say, yes, you do have a server. I do have services enabled externally. Why? What services are they, right? Well, a web server, okay, is one. But what if, again, a lot of people say, well, I don't like using the cloud. I don't trust Google. I don't trust Microsoft. I don't trust any of them. I have my own email server, like classic IT, right? We run our own server, Joe. We have our own FTP server for file shares. So this is where they're looking to see, well, have you got anything that's out there on the internet? If I scan your ports, do I find an open FTP port? Do I find an open email port? Because all of these allow me to then say, well, what version of this FTP server? Well, really, a 10-year-old FTP server, I can get that. And now I can attack that and move in there. So they're interested to know why you would have that, right? Services enabled, they're enabled externally. So I'm going to say no for now, move on. Cloud services, right?
Sorry, can I ask a question, John?
Yes.
Does that include if I'm running, you know, as I would be, an app for customers and they can access that app? Is that?
Well, we're just about to come on to cloud. Is it a cloud app?
Yeah.
It's in here. Here we go. We're arriving at the answer to your question.
Okay.
So that previous one is thinking about something you're running on a device you own, right? Or as I say, some people do run their laptops with services they, you know, because they just perhaps old school, right? They don't trust the cloud and they remote into their laptop, right, to get stuff, right? Or I know people that do run laptops containing email servers, right? It's crazy, but it's out there. It's just asking the question: have you closed off all your ports? Right? Is everything closed except for the, you know, it should just be outbound ports? Do you have a list of all the cloud services you use in your organization? The answer, of course, should be yes. Right? What if it was no? So here's we discussed this a little bit earlier. Different types of cloud service. Everything from software as a service, where Microsoft takes care of everything. all you have to care about really is that you know how to create users and you create secure passwords and that they have MFA. Microsoft will take care of the firewall boundaries. It maintains updates and patches on its service. It ensures that its own servers are securely configured, etc., right? Platform as a service, Amazon, right? Azure, right? You have to do slightly more. Infrastructure as a service, right? We're right down to sort of some bare metal offerings that other people are offering. And of course, then you have more, you have to patch the server. You have to maintain the servers up to date. You have to upgrade the whole server when the operating system is now out of date. So each of these is just defining your level of responsibility. And each of the services have that. I mean, a good example is, for example, Microsoft does not back up the service. There's no backup, right? If you delete an account, wait 30 days, that account is gone, you'll never get it back, right? So backing up is your responsibility and user security is your responsibility. Everything else is Microsoft's. So saying, yes, we do have a list. You should have, and that's again part of your asset register. So your Azure servers or your AWS servers are on your asset register and have their own risks, have their own data that you store about it. So we say yes, we do. I mentioned earlier, have you enabled MFA? If the answer is no, it's bad, right? It's basically always bad. I can't think of any good reason. And I work with organizations who say to me, John, the trouble is I need to open up this account for something. And you go, what? And they go, well, I have one service who'd like to report errors to another service using email, wants to log in as that person and then generate a report. It's tricky because essentially you have now created a small vulnerability where you have a semi-unattended account that only requires a password to log in. And so therefore things that are not true for MFA are now true for that account. So MFA eliminates the problem of, for example, a keylogger on a laptop. So a classic attack would be for a virus to load a keylogger and then to start logging your passwords and reporting them off to somewhere else. All good, that's fine. MFA fixes that problem because when they try and use it, pops on your phone, you go, wait, that's not me. And then you can lock the account. So MFA, very important for us all to get going. A real basic now. And in fact, at some point in the next 5 years, we will have all switched away from passwords altogether. So we are moving towards a passwordless environment for most devices and most systems. Google and Microsoft are gradually pushing us that way, and eventually it'll all be biometrics or MFAs. Have you understood the shared responsibility securement for each of the clouds you use? You could have Microsoft 365 in which you're just doing user accounts. You could have Amazon where you're also doing the server patching. Yes. Getting there. Secure configurations, right? You got 5 laptops, you hand out the laptop to staff. Do you just leave it blank or do you switch off stuff you don't need? And the answer here would be yes, you've removed all the software you don't need. Again, what would that be on Microsoft? Not a lot, but Mac comes with quite a lot of software. It's GarageBand, right? Now, I'm not saying GarageBand is a security risk. I'm just saying GarageBand is software you don't need, right? And that therefore is a vulnerability, right? So everything, if you don't have it on there, it can't be a vulnerability. They often talk about, for example, web servers. I can't imagine standard laptops these days coming with a web server loaded, right? But that is the question to ask: is do I know what's on this device? Have I uninstalled everything I don't need, so that it doesn't need to be patched, so that it doesn't need to be kept up to date, so that it's not a vulnerability?
So can I ask a question there? So if people on your team are using their home device work, are you saying that they have to uninstall because they're using the same device? They have to uninstall anything they don't need on their device.
This is the really tricky part about mobile device management or BYOD, is that it works for as long as you're not trying to pass Cyber Essentials, right? Now, the ways around this are to create policies. You could say, if you intend to use a home laptop for work, it has to meet the laptop's, it has to meet work specifications, right? So it has to be, it can't be Windows XP, or, blah, blah, blah. And again, Intune or MDM solutions can help with that by actually investigating the device when you first log on. So you would log in, you go to Microsoft 365 and you try to log in, add a school account or work account, and it then does a test and go, oh, it doesn't meet it, right? and it can then report that, and you can decide, okay, that laptop doesn't meet the specification because the firewall is off, or it doesn't meet the specification because it's too old or out of date or something. So mobile device management solutions can help you actually do the investigation of a device and then mark it as compliant or not. And then you can say, how severe is its non-compliance? And say, well, it's, blah, 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 it's okay. But if it's uncompliant to this level, then just don't allow the login, right? So harder and harder to manage with a wide variety of end user devices. The difference between Apple and Mac is a profound switch there, and sometimes requires 2 MDMs. And this is, of course, also applies to mobile phones. So what, if you've installed TikTok on your phone, again, that's the reason why, governments won't allow home users to access the, even just Microsoft 365 from the home devices. What if you've got something that may be a fundamental risk of eavesdropping or data capture, right? And when we see, for example, how much data Threads is going to grab, right? In the news in the last week, we realized how much data is just spewing out of these phones, all of which could be used to form a social engineering attack. Anyway, so disabling software on devices that are accessing applies equally to servers and to front end, right? And again, why IT does all the rigmarole it does of locking down devices and ensuring that software is only added from official sources. So, I mean, for example, I have customers who get around this by saying, yes, it is our policy that you only install software from the Google Store or the Apple Store, right? And that might be enough. Just to say that you have a policy, it's a policy enforced through training. So all the users access a training course. They see if they want to use this device that they can't sideload an app from the internet, and that they have installed antivirus, and that they have a PIN. And some of these things have been enforced in the past through Microsoft, and sometimes you can just enforce it through policy. It's harder through policy. It's harder to evidence that it's working. That's a way of getting around through this. Yes, we've disabled the software we don't use. Have you ensured that all the accounts on your devices are only used that you use as part of your day-to-day? This is saying that if you're on a server, right, but you're not logging into that server as admin to then browse the internet, right? So in other words, you only log into the services that you need to use. So you'd have a general user, John at SmartDPO, but I also have, say, an admin at SmartDPO or SaaS admin or different user accounts I use for different things. I don't log into those accounts on my browser and then start doing regular day-to-day work, because I introduce lots of potential errors when I do that. If I'm logged in as administrator and I press delete, what am I deleting? I could just casually delete the wrong thing. So we're only going to log in as our day-to-day. Yes, we only have accounts on there which help us with our jobs. Right? Is auto-run, autoplay disabled? Yes, please. Yes, please. Do not have that on. Do you have pins? Oh, and also for autoplay, I mean, also have a policy that says, I would have a policy that says the USB can't be used. You can't have USB drives. They're just too insecure. Please don't have them. Please don't use them. Please share via an online account that you both have the correct user IDs for, so that you know that you're sharing with a real person that you've authorized to access and stuff. Do you have a PIN? And again, these are all mandatory now on mobile devices. It's very hard to find mobile devices that will let you get away with this, right? Because it's not in the interest of them. So again, this is slightly old hat. Passwords are all the default passwords. Again, how often are you having default passwords? Almost never now, right? This really is belonging to a slightly old school of kind of physical hardware. Do you have something written down to advise all users how important it is to use different passwords for different systems? Super important advice for us personally as well, right? How easy it is to just use the same password when we sign up to Pinterest, and then just use the same password when we sign up to that shopping channel, and use the same password. And of course, one breach means that attackers can now attempt to essentially use the same credential for a different system, right? So we must use different passwords. How to do that? You could use passphrases, easier to remember that way. You could have a passphrase that somehow tried to involve the website, I know people have used that, so different passphrases involving the website name. Or you can use a password manager, which is 100% what I'd be advising. There are free password managers that are very good and allow you to create unguessable nightmare passwords for all of your websites, knowing that you'll never forget any single one of them, right? So yes, you should have advice. It's a policy, right? You make sure that each user requires their username, their own username. Correct. Again, I have been places where you just log in as office user, right? And the password is X. Well, now you don't know who did what. You can't segment the data into Jenny's data and Jim's data. It's all the same data. You can't possibly be segmenting by use. And of course, you've no idea who did it when they did do it. So again, everybody must have their own accounts. Yes. It's slightly related to our previous thing. Inside the password, the separate password policy, you should also say, what is a good password, right? There are actually websites out there that will generate passwords for you. Your password manager will also generate passwords for you. There's no reason for you to be thinking, what password should I use? I use Bitwarden. Sometimes I use NPass. Other times, both of those allow you to go create password. Your browsers also do this now. Browsers will create passwords and browsers will store passwords, right? Personally, I don't advise using the browser as password manager, despite how convenient that is, just because you might want to change browser. I don't think they're particularly insecure. I think they're as secure as your computer security, which is, we've already agreed, is secure. But multiple browsers, I think, is a good thing. People often have to use different browsers for different platforms, or they're testing their own software for different users. Password manager gets around all that. And of course, the other thing you can do with the password manager is actually put the passwords for the company in the password manager. So you can create an admin password for Adobe, Amazon, Microsoft, and actually keep those in a separate password manager that you can then allocate to staff. So again, there's a whole level of complexity to get into, but it's now possible for your IT team to give someone access to a password vault that they can use for as long as they're an employee, and then remove that when they leave. So it's a way of getting around the whole kind of single sign-on when you have many SaaSes that are part of that, is you can use a password manager to act as a single sign-on for you. So yes, you have a policy with a comprehensive password policy. Yes, you do. As I say, password manager does this. Good advice, 3 words is the current government's advice, 3 words. And of course, there are public websites that allow you to generate, interesting ones. The brute force is, of course, yes, MFA, right? Is the number 1. And the second one is that your system locks you out after 5 attempts. Otherwise, someone could obviously just hack away. Malware, antivirus, we used to call it. Now we're calling it malware protection. Have you got some is installed, and that's servers and mobiles and laptops, right? Are all of your computers protected by one of these things? So you could say, yes, I have that, and I limit installation to the approved set. The approved set could just be, from Cyber Essentials perspective, the official store. So for example, a Windows 11, you install some software, it says this software is not in the store. And you could say, it's a policy for you to say, no, come and ask us, right? It's a policy to please ask before you install software, or you're free to install software provided it's in the store, right? And that you have anti-malware installed, right? As I say, it's inside the box inside Microsoft. Mac has a slightly different approach, which is it has the signed apps on the store. It has some sort of fingerprinting for dodgy apps. But again, you can install malware protection on. Again, you can buy that off the internet. There are competitors. Either way, do you have installed? Yes, you do. Right. If you don't have installed, you won't pass.
Sorry, what is your obligation on Cyber Essentials for if there's let's say today there's a vulnerability that Microsoft announced, right? And they don't know how to fix it. Okay. Let's say, because that does happen.
Yep. The 0-day exploit. Yep.
Yeah. So what is your responsibility as an organization for Cyber Essentials when this happens?
So Cyber Essentials really don't care. So essentially they hit you once a year and you answer these questions, and it's to help you guide your practices, right? You're never going to report to them. You're never going to. It's not like the ICO, right? They're not a regulator, right? So whereas the ICO is expecting you to report to them if you have a breach that's material and might bring a risk of harm, expecting to go through a process of thinking about that and then writing them to say, okay, we accidentally did X. This is what we've done to fix it. And they might say, we'd like to inspect, or they might say, your actions sound reasonable. Cyber Essentials, it's just a one-hit audit every year. You have to resubscribe and complete the questionnaire again. But essentially, it's entirely on you to have answered this. So when you said we have a weekly patching process and that's acceptable to them, then that's true right now, and you'll wait for Microsoft to patch it. You're responsible and you're accountable. So essentially, the fact that they've done that, and you feel that the vulnerability sufficiently changes the risk profile for something you're protecting, right? It could be company secret, it could be PII. Then you could decide, okay, we're taking that service offline, right? So until it's patched. So and that could be a day, right? So what services do you have that Microsoft are responsible for? Maybe an Azure service, right? Maybe the password checker isn't working, and so users can't test it. Maybe say you built an account process and the users create a nice account for themselves, and then you check the password using this API to one of these hacked password banks, and say that was down because it had found a vulnerability. Now you can't just check the passwords. You might decide to say registrations are blocked today because we can't check the password. So it's up to you to decide how the outage fits within your risk profile. Make sense? So again, this is where you're saying just install out of the official stores or whatever the platform is. And again, even Microsoft now has an official store on its Windows platform, and you can make that a policy or you can make it a rule. You have a process to follow to create a user account. The answer is yes. No one should be able to just create a user account without a process, right? Especially a privileged account. But essentially what you're saying is that a hacker basically comes in as a temp and they say, oh, I need an account on this system. And someone goes, yeah, sure. They didn't ask. They just said, yeah, I need to do some work. So I need to do things. And bear in mind the social idea, which is that when people give a reason, right, people are more likely to say, yes, I need to jump into the front of this queue because I have to do something for somebody. Works better than just trying to say, can I get to the front? People say no. They say, but I have to do something. They go, yeah, okay, right? So when a user account is created, follow the checklist. Has it been signed off by HR? Has HR done the background checks, the DBS checks, right? Has it been signed off by the line manager? Does the line manager agree this person exists? Have they accessed to a secure system? Has IT approved that they've been trained on that system? Those are 3 simple checks. Therefore, you should have a process to do that. A checklist, a workflow, a signed form, whatever it is, up to you. But a user should not be given access to your system without a process, right? Obviously, in the first few days of a startup, everybody's just creating accounts. Yeah, give me an account in that system. Yeah. Done that. But really, in the end, a year in, you've got 10 employees, and everybody's got access to all systems, and every new employee is automatically being given access to all systems, right? No, that can't really be true. And we need to have some kind of control. Otherwise, one of these people is not the one you wanted, and they're inside your system. So yes, I have a process which approves account creation. Starters and leavers, big one, right? So a person leaves the organization, you freeze them on account X, Microsoft 365, good, done. But they're still on Adobe, accessing your customer secrets and your IP. They're still on Figma. They're still on all these other systems. They're still on Jira, accessing it, right? And so what is the process for someone leaves? Again, a checklist. All the systems that person has access to is removed. Mover, so they're moving from department A, finance, and moving to HR, perhaps they're a contractor or a temp. They should be taken off the finance system and added to the HR system, right? And then when you leave, taken off the HR system. So starters and leavers process, very important, often not present, in my opinion. The classic left to somebody else to fix. Yes, there's a process to record all the user accounts we have, right? This is, as I say, if a person becomes an administrator, you've just opened the whole risks. For me, this is a training issue. Can they demonstrate have they been assessed for suitability to drive a forklift truck? No one gets access to the forklift truck keys until they have passed the forklift truck driving test. Why do we not ask that in IT? We often just simply say, you've got experience? Yeah, okay, fine. So how do we check that person has the experience they say they have? It's the quality of the interview, it's the references, it's the previous jobs, or it's assessment, right? They're asking us for assessing someone's basic knowledge. Yes, we have rules. As mentioned before, once you've logged in as an administrative account on a server, for example, you shouldn't be hanging around on that, then browsing the internet. Yes, we have a process. What is the process? It's a policy, it's a procedure, it's a disciplinary process if someone breaks it. A lot of these things are going to go into policies. Finally, backing up data. Do you have a backup? Do you have a backup of everything you ever created? For us cloud guys, we say, yes, I got backup. I'm on the cloud. It's not a backup. It's not a backup at all, right? It's just a copy that you're currently keeping. And if you delete things from there, they're gone. So most of these things have a kind of a 30-day trash bin, and that's great. So if you delete some files and then you want to go back and find them, they'll be there. But after 30 days, they're gone. So a year from now, when someone in finance goes, oh, wow, I need a copy of something. Where is it? Can't find it. Someone goes, oh, I was cleaning up. I deleted that. And there's no backup. So you need a backup. There are plenty of cloud versions out there. For example, Cloud Ally is a quite good one that I use quite a lot. I find it an excellent system. And basically, you set up an account on there. It's not particularly expensive. It syncs to your account, and every night takes a backup. And there's your nice dashboard, and everything's backed up last night, and that's kept forever until you delete it. So 5 years from now, someone complains, I was mistreated. Their accounts, both accounts were long since deleted. Email accounts are gone. Files have all gone. But someone says, he abused me and I have emails. You can now say, yes, I can retrieve that. I can go find that. I can get that back for as long as you like. So a backup system doesn't come with every cloud. Can't restate that. And again, we're back to the responsibility matrix. Doesn't include backing up Microsoft 365. Doesn't include everything except user access, which you get to choose. So they do everything else, not backup, just this piece. So understanding exactly how all the clouds work for that is important. Yes, we have a backup system. And that's it. Word submit is there because this is you putting your plan in, and they produce a nice document for you to. So if we'd answered no for a bunch of those, if we'd answered I don't understand this, if I'd answered any other questions, here would be a nice little plan for you to say, I need to fix these things before I go off to Cyber Essentials and ask to be self-assessed. Okay, or asked to be assessed for their gold audit, including endpoints. There's various options. So that is Cyber Essentials. As you can see, it's not rocket science. It is 100% expected of you by government agencies. So if you're going to pass the DTAC, which is the Digital Technology Assessment Criteria, in order to get access to your contracts, they're going to ask for several things. One is, do you have a data protection officer? 2, have you done a data protection impact assessment? 3, are you Cyber Essentials? I think it was something else. But essentially, we've done these things in the last 4 sessions. Yes, you have a DPO. 2, you've done a data protection impact assessment. 3, you've passed your Cyber Essentials. I can't remember what the other ones are specifically DTAP, but you can see that the government has a few basic routines that we expect you to have met. And so this, when you've done the Cyber Essentials, you've done a basic. And then when we talked before about cyber assurance, which is the next one up, which is a more risk management framework, which I thoroughly approve of because it's aimed at SMEs. It's nice and agile. It's not onerous like ISO 27001. We can do that later. Again, it says you can't pass cyber assurance until you pass Cyber Essentials. So again, it's for all of these quite cost-effective, SME-based government NHS schemes. Cyber Essentials is one of the first things from the door. So I'm very conscious of time. That's 11 o'clock. Are there any questions? Hi, Douglas. Mute.
Sorry, I'm good, thank you. How are you, John?
I'm very good, thank you. Yeah.
I have a question that's tangential to all of this, and it's about DTAC.
Yep.
And I was just wondering if you knew a way of doing DTAC that didn't break the bank.
Well, so Cyber Essentials definitely doesn't break the bank. right? So I mean, the only time it breaks the bank is if suddenly you decide you're going to hand out mobile phones. But as I say, I have customers, and what they do is they submit a list of mobile phones that are ancient. The assessor goes,
sorry, you may have missed my question.
Sorry,
about DTAC.
Yes. So DTAC contains essentially Cyber Essentials, the Data Protection Impact Assessment,
DPIA.
Yeah, exactly. None of these things will break the bank.
Cool.
So on the privacy side, you just need to speak to someone like me, right? Now, obviously, we did a course, and all of that's available. I think the Foundry had recorded all of these, so you could watch the DPA one from last week, and that basically said the ICO has a questionnaire. The French government has an even better I don't know, generator tool to ask you all the questions, and eventually you'll produce yourself a very nice DPIA, right? Which will be then signed by your data protection officer. Assuming you need a data protection officer, you need one, and there's various criteria. The ICO website is brilliant, right? You go on there, you select small business, and you will find a series of easy questionnaires to help you say, what do I need to have done? So, for example, what kind of customer data are you storing, Douglas? What is your personal data expectation? I don't know anything about your business yet.
Okay, that's fine. I can take a look at the ICO website.
Perfect, right? So it will say, do I need a data protection officer? If you tick the questions, you intend to do some processing of data. That data might be high risk. It might contain children's data. It'll say yes. So one of the first things you could do is approach me and say, can I talk to you for an hour, right? You and I set up a meeting, right? Absolutely free, right? We'll talk about what your plans are for the business and what a data protection privacy plan or a privacy kind of strategy might be. And then you can think about going to market and finding a data protection officer. It's a service I offer. No one will be cheaper than me, I guarantee it, right? And then you can decide where to go for that. The cybersecurity side, right? Yes, I'm an IT director, ex-IT director, and so I can help you with that. So I do provide this service to Foundry members. We can start with a free meeting and go from there. Breaking the bank is what we absolutely don't want you to do. And my whole strategy is you can get us so much stuff off the internet, off the ICO site, off the Cyber Essentials website, off the National Cybersecurity Center, all of those kind of things that allow you to say, do some work on your own, build up your knowledge. And then it's often just a question of then having someone run the rule over it and say, that looks fine, submit that to the Cyber Essentials assessment team and see if you pass. If you don't pass, all they say is, why not? And you just fix that. And as I say, they're not very onerous, right? If you say, right, I'm taking those mobile phones off, they go, fine. They don't say, well, how are those people accessing? They don't ask that question. You've agreed you don't do that. And so it just gets passed. And so, yes, doing this without breaking the bank, 100%, Douglas. No reason for you to spend thousands.
So another question. So we've done DTAC successfully for one of our platforms. And we've got a second platform.
Yep.
So I assume that we need to do a DTAC for that as well, or can we just piggyback on the first one?
So the theory would be I'm not a DTAC expert, right? But my immediate thought would be you'd have to have at least done a second data protection impact assessment, right?
Another DPIA.
Yeah. So and the question that would be, have you materially changed what you do, or is it just a copy? Right? If it's the same platform, if it's doing the same thing with the same customers, with the same processing, then you would just basically copy it and say this is platform 2. If it's materially different, then you could ask. So I have a customer recently that added a new feature, a face-to-face system involving counseling, and they just modified the data protection impact assessment, right? They just added the service, they noted an extra risk, and they we produced version 2. So I think that that's the first thing that happened. Then obviously, have you materially changed the services at the back end that would require another Cyber Essentials? Probably not. If you have all these things in policies, they're not asking you how many servers you have. They're asking you, do you have a process for it? And you're saying, yeah, so nothing changes there. We're still Cyber Essentials. We've added an updated DPIA, always good practice anyway, to say, can we see any more risks? Now, as to whether you need to then re-register, I think you have to do it every year anyway. So basically,
yeah, you do. So we've just done it.
Yeah.
So then we've just done our Cyber Essentials again.
Yes, fine.
And passed it.
Yeah, great, exactly. So I think a DTAC expert is probably what you need to say. Do I need to launch one now, or do I just wait to the end of the year and add this to my my resubmission?
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Good.
Just a quick question, John. So what is Cyber Essentials Plus?
Well, it used to be it would add your endpoints. So
Okay.
there was various. There's whether or not someone separately audits you, because obviously the self-assessment is you just do it, you submit it, some no name has a look at it and says, yeah, fine, maybe you have an email banter. And then gold is someone actually come in, for example, on site, and plus used to be endpoints. So if you're a 100-person organization of an office, you've got 100 computers, you know, they'll come in and actually have a look and see what your physical environment looks like. I guess for most of us at home, we don't need that.
Great.
So did that cover all of cybersecurity? No, it definitely didn't. I don't want you to go away thinking, right, tick, done cybersecurity. No, it's not. These are basics, right? And we go back to episode 2 of this podcast, and we looked at risk management. The core for you guys is to say, I have a really good risk management framework. I have a board level appointee with sufficient knowledge to be able to be a board level appointee for information risks, including privacy, cybersecurity, right? That person gets a report from somebody internally who is on top of it. Sounds like, you know, like that could be you, Douglas, right? And I report to that person on the board once a quarter, right? And in order for that to work and to be held accountable, I have therefore got a risk map. I'm confident that it's up to date. I update it every 6 months with any applications I've added, any new risks I find, any mitigations I need to put in place, and the status of those mitigations. They don't have to be finished. They just have to be noted that we intend to move towards this in the next 3 months. It's like an audit. It's like constantly running your own audit, right? So that when something goes wrong, you go, did I know this? Is it on my risk map? What, you know, it's how many times have I been in an organization that something goes wrong, and it's not on the risk map. You can't go, how is that possible, right? Well, your process is not quite good enough. It wasn't holistic enough. We didn't have enough expertise in the room when we thought up the risks. It was just me and Jim, and we thought up the risk we thought of, and we didn't bring in a cybersecurity person. We didn't bring in the developers. We didn't bring in any third party to go, what about this? What about this? What about this? And as a result, it was an earthquake. And, you know, we lost our service for 2 days because we were in Turkey, right? And we just didn't think of that. Why didn't we think of that? We just hadn't added the physical part. We just locked up the accounts or added the malware or done the things in Cyber Essentials, but it just didn't mention earthquakes. So, you know, the risk management process is the thing that protects you, because otherwise you're just ticking boxes. And it's easy to tick boxes. And as I say, for Cyber Essentials, it's easy to get through. They're great questions, and you should have fun answering them and, you know, coming up to speed on the risks they're exposing to you. At the end, it's the risk management process and confidence in that assurance process that protects you guys year after year after year.